Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in February. I read 7 books in February, 6 of them being novels and 1 of them being a novella. It was a pretty romance heavy month, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, if it's February, what are you gonna do? You have to read romance. Oh my god, this shelf confused me. I thought like the screen was cutting out halfway through. The first book I finished in February. I actually started it in January, I believe, like the very end of January, and then I'm pretty sure I finished it pretty early on in February as well. And that was The Dragon's Bride by Katie Roberts. I was too curious. I had to see what it was about. Katie Robert, I said her name wrong so many times in the last video. She's slightly better known for the Dark Olympus series, I think. I think that one's a little more famous. It's quite big on Book Talk and BookTube. Dark retelling, kind of inspired by Greek mythology, dark romance type situation. I read the first 3 books of recounted in the novella. I have yet to read the 3rd one yet, though I thought I would have read it by now, but I haven't. I've not been particularly in the mood to yet. But I was in the mood to read about a woman banging a dragon, apparently. These like monster human relationships ones, I mean, they've intrigued me. I wanted to know what it was like. Our lead character, whose name I have completely forgotten, makes a deal with a demon. She's kind of in some trouble in her regular life, and in this world demons can make deals with people, in particular women, and they will be married off to another demon for 7 years. Most of the time this is for breeding reasons. Yeah, it's as kooky as it sounds. I don't think this one was as strong as any of the Dark Olympus novels that I read thus far. The pacing was quite quick. It felt very short. It didn't feel very fleshed out to me. I didn't particularly care about the characters or their plights. Is it blight or plight? Like, it's an interesting premise, but we don't spend much time in the world and the fantasy element of it all because it's the romance is front and center. And I think because of that, it sounds almost as loose as it sounds to me when I'm saying it now. It doesn't feel very secure, which is fine. I mean, that's a genre thing. I'm just used to reading like fantasy, and so I want to feel secure in my fantasy world. Romance itself, because I didn't care about the characters that much, I didn't really care about the romance that much. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't entertaining. It was at times. It just didn't leave like a big impression on me. I think I'd give this one a 4 out of 10. I don't know if I want to continue on with the series. I can see myself getting bored, and there is just something like you know when you know something's wrong but you find it entertaining or like interesting anyway. It almost has like a little bit of that going on. Sometimes you want something even though you know it's gonna be cheesy and not the best. This is that for me. I also really love, like, I think they have new covers for the Deals with the Demon series, but I really love like the cheesy romance covers, and so when I do get it, it's gonna be that cover. I audiobooked it, which is why I don't have a physical copy yet. It was narrated by, I didn't write it down, it's narrated by blank. I mean, they did a fine job. I didn't really have any problems with them necessarily. Now that I say it though, the woman narrator, she emphasized a lot. Like, it almost didn't feel like Katie Robert, like it felt very, very different from the Dark Olympus series. And I think part of that is in the narration, definitely. I think part of it is also because just the world isn't as secure, and I felt really secure in the Dark Olympus world, and I really cared about all the characters and they all felt really fleshed out. Pacing, the length of the book, and then the narrator, I think contributed to all that. Okay, let's move on. We can't talk about this anymore. Next up, I read My Favorite Half Night Stand by Christina Lauren. This was the only Christina Lauren like rom-com, standalone rom-com that they've published that I hadn't read yet. Christina Lauren, to me, the writing is pretty solid. Like, is it Shakespeare? No. I mean, it is overwritten at times, and things that don't need to be clarified are clarified. I mean, like, since reading a lot of like self-published romances, I definitely see the writing as being stronger. But then that would make sense because they have the luxury of an editor who's gonna, you know, pull them up on their crap. So that's not necessarily a criticism of self-published writers either. It's just saying, I think as far as romance writers, you know, with the tropes, they're not that bad. I really like Christina Lauren. I like the level of smut versus not smut. They're not that smutty, which I like. Also, I'm more invested in the characters than romance a lot of the time, and that's what Christina Lauren is, and they're kind of rom-coms, so they're a little bit more light-hearted and silly and fun a lot of the time. And the characters, I think, in their books are really strong, and I think actually that's the strongest thing about this book. So, My Favorite Half Night Stand, we have a friendship group, mostly of guys, and then this one girl. Millie, and they work together in a university. The guys are all, I think, sciencey, and she is a criminology professor. She and one of the guys kind of hook up, kind of, you know, start having a thing for each other. But there's this dance ball thing looming, this night out for the university. The president's gonna be there, and so they all decide they're gonna get dates. And so they sign up to this dating app and try and get dates. See, it takes a while for the premise to come into play, but I knew this going into it and was fine. So I'm going to tell you the rest of the premise. Skip forward like 5 or 10 seconds if you don't want to know the whole synopsis, because I normally don't want to know the whole synopsis. What ends up happening is Millie's original profile was really bad, and so she makes a new profile that's a little bit more vague, and she starts secretly talking to that guy she had a thing for that she hooked up with, and he doesn't realize it's her. So the premise of this one, I found it frustrating. Like, I understood why she did what she did. Her reasoning wasn't completely false. Oh, trying to say this spoiler free, like that premise gives a lot away, I feel like. It wasn't my favourite of their premises. I mean, it was fun. I really liked the friendship group. I think the characters are the strongest part of the book. I mean, it was a Christine Lauren. It was easy, it was addictive. The audiobook was really good. Again, I did not write down. I just have narrated by blank, so I can't tell you who it's narrated by. The guy narrator has definitely narrated for them for, I think they both have narrated for them for, I think they might have both narrated Dating You, Hating You. To me, like, this is just more like a mid Christina Lauren. I think it would come underneath the Honey Don't list, which I think is the most recent of theirs I've read. I don't love this cover. It's such a hideously bright, like, green-yellow colour. There is a cover that matches the Unhoneymooners and the new covers for Dating You, Hating You and Love in Other Words. They all have like matching covers. I think I'd give this one a 6 out of 10. Again, like a lower Christina Lauren rating for me. Yeah, there's nothing else to say. I don't know why I'm like stalling. Next up was The Sealed Letter by Emma Donoghue. I have yet to take this sticker off. I am just now realising this. I've owned this book for a really long time. Not this copy. I had like an old secondhand paperback copy that I bought during uni. It would have been during my 3rd year. So that must have been like 2020. So like 3 years ago. I've had this book on my shelf for a while. I read The Wonder by Emma Donoghue in January, and it's probably my favourite book I've read so far this year in all 2 months. That and Women Talking have like really stood out to me. Like, they might be new favourites of mine. And in the past I've also read her debut Stir Fry, which is lesser well known, and Room, which is very well known. This is my 4th Donoghue. I want to slowly make my way through all of her work. I'm a big fan of her writing. Every book she writes will be so distinct and different, both in premise and writing style. Like, if you didn't know it was by Emma Donoghue, you wouldn't be able to guess, because there's nothing that really links them all together. I mean, they all have really interesting themes, I think, and I did sit down and like think about it, and like there are definitely themes that pop up in multiple books that she probably seems to be drawn to, but they're still so distinct and unique. This one is inspired by a real life case. It's about, again, see, the premise like kind of gives a lot away. We're following 3 different characters. We're following Emily Fido, she's known as Fido. What's the woman's name? Helen Codrington, and her husband, I can't remember her husband's name, he's like a vice admiral. We switch between all 3 of their perspectives, 3rd person, and Helen is having an affair, her husband suspects her of having an affair, Fido kind of gets pulled into it to kind of try and like be the go-between between Helen and her lover. Just kind of watch this situation play out between the 3 of them. It's historical fiction. It takes place late 1900s. I remember nothing. Victorian London, 1900s, my god, late 1800s, Jesus Christ. I think the fact that it was inspired by like a true life case and like adapted in this way was really interesting, because newspapers would like update each week what was going on. So kind of getting it a little more fleshed out, like wondering what would have really been happening on the inner lives of these people. I love that concept, and so I thought it was really fun play on what happened. I think the characters were really strong. Again, she has such great characters. They feel so real and flawed. Just like real people. Like, none of them are good, none of them are bad. It's one of those where you kind of flip-flop around with who you're rooting for. I did, at least. I could understand all of their positions, and it was really hard to watch it play out. I do definitely think like feminist ideas come through quite strong in here. Fido is kind of in that group of like suffragettes. She publishes a woman's journal, she's a working woman, and that's kind of a weird concept still. It all felt very subtle, and it was quite a slow story, like, but I really liked that about it. The only thing I'll say is I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed, I think, all of her other books maybe. I think objectively I realise it's well done, it's clever. I really am struggling to fault it. It's well written, it's thought-provoking. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed some of her other works. That being said, I'd still give it like an 8 out of 10 because it is still, I realised, a strong book. And I was invested. I wanted to know how this was all going to play out. Oh, this one's a good one. Next, I read The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston wrote the YA like companion trilogy. This is her first like adult romance. It's a paranormal romance. Our main character can see ghosts, and it's like she's a ghostwriter as well. She's a ghostwriter, she can see ghosts, and her family works as at a funeral home, so she's literally grown up with death as an ever-present theme in her life, and her family have like this really unique, more positive view on death because of their profession and the way that their parents raised up her and her siblings. Just that was all really fun. All of the layers of like ghosts and death. And it's really interesting in the afterword, Ashley writes about how she's like terrified, and I am one of those people that I am terrified by death. Like if I think about it too long, I will just spiral. But I really enjoyed this. I loved like the unique perspective, and it does have a rom-com feel. It deals with a lot of heavy themes, like death is very prevalent, but it never feels super heavy. Like there's a lightness to it, and I think it's mostly because of that decision of them being raised in a funeral home and their view on death being slightly different. She's a ghostwriter for a famous romance novelist, but in the past she's had her heart broken really badly, and so she doesn't believe in love anymore, and so she's trying to finish this novel. She can't get it done on the deadline. Her editor, she has a new editor, and he's like, you gotta get it done by the deadline, and she's like, ha ha ha, great, can definitely do that. But then her dad dies, and so she has to go home, and when she gets home this ghost shows up, and lo and behold, it is the ghost of the editor. There's a lot happening. There's like, what's going on with the editor? Like, he seems to be dead. Her dad has died, and so she's also grieving her dad, and she's also trying to deal with the fact that she doesn't believe in love anymore, but she's a romance writer pretty much. I loved the family dynamics. I just loved all the relationships. It was so much fun. It was so sweet and cute. An audiobook to this one as well. Do I have? Oh, I have a narrator for you, Eileen Stevens, and she did a fantastic job. She was so good. It was just really sweet, and it was really touching. I teared up a couple of times because of like how deep it was with all the grief and stuff, and it was just so nice. There was one chapter that was really long, and it's like the backstory between our main character and her ex. It happens quite early in, and that is important information that we need to know. I wish it was kind of like fed in little chunks rather than just like all told, because it was quite a long chapter, and it took a while for the book to get going, for like our main premise to get into motion. You know what else to say? I really enjoyed it. I found it really addictive, really sweet, really cute, really fun. Love the cover and the colours of the cover. She has another one coming out this year, which again sounds like it's like romance with a splash of like some kind of sci-fi paranormal magic type thing going on, like some kind of time loop situation it sounds like, and I'm definitely gonna read that one. I'm so excited for it to come out. 8 out of 10 to The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Next up is the novella I read this month, and that is Rizzio by Denise Mina. This is part of the Dark Tales. This one was really well written. The writing was really strong. We kind of jump around from people's perspectives, and it was quite funny a lot of the time as well. I really like the tone it was written in and the way it was written. My history is spotty. I know random bits of history from like my education, but I'm always down to learn more about history. This kind of general vague period of the Tudors and Mary Queen of Scots and the Stuarts is one that I know a little bit more about, although not necessarily Mary Queen of Scots herself. I did watch the film, and I was like, reading this, I was like, do I remember this happening in the film? I think I kind of do. So now I really want to watch the film. It's a good film. It's quite a slow one because it's about like a history drama, but it's got Margot Robbie and Saoirse Ronan in it, so if you've not watched it and you're interested, I recommend it. I think it's on like Apple Plus or something. I've seen it about on one of the streaming services. But I'm now definitely more interested. This is definitely like giving me a poke. I need to like learn more about this area of history. But I don't know if in Scotland, obviously they might learn more about this, but in English education, I mean, obviously they don't tell us any of this stuff. So I found it so fascinating. Like, again, because it's a woman queen, we have like themes of like sexism versus her being like a strong ruler. Yeah, I just found it so interesting. It was so easy to read because the writing style was so good. It was like funny but also sad and touching. I really want to give it a 9 out of 10. Like, I think it's really strong. I just don't know if I like feel strongly enough about it to give it a 9 out of 10, so I'm gonna give it an 8.5. Highly recommend it if it sounds interesting. And I like the cover for this one. I like the splatter of the blood and the knife. I'm excited to get the hardcover copy. The next book that I read was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is like the dark academia granddaddy, it seems. Like, I think Dark Academia obviously existed before this, but this is like the big one that when Dark Academia comes up, inevitably the Secret History will come up. I'm glad that I've read it. It's a little bit of a beast. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by the author. Don't know if I'd recommend it or not. I had the feeling that if I tried to sit down and read it physically, I would struggle because of how long it is, and also in this whole thing is like 8 chapters. And I'm a short chapter girl. I really struggle when the chapters are long. And because it like seemed like it was gonna be a little bit dense, I just thought I'd really struggle reading it, and I don't know if I'd be able to keep up stamina. So I opted for an audiobook, which wasn't awful. But you can tell that she's not an actress. She had quite a lot of monotone, and I definitely think if I had read it, my interpretation of a lot of the characters would be very different. It doesn't matter, it's not an awful interpretation, I just know that it's not necessarily the one that I would have had by myself. The writing I think was pretty well done. I feel like there were like 1 or 2 little things that, you know, I didn't love, but for the most part it's really solid. And every now and then, in fact, it'd be really pretty. The descriptions were really nice. This is really just a month of strong characters, apart from The Dragon's Bride. The characters were so multi-layered and interesting as well. I mean, it's a book about their motives and their relationships with each other, which are toxic and not great. I don't know how I would sum this up for you, so I'm just going to read what the back says. Under the influence of a charismatic classics professor, a group of clever eccentric misfits at a New England college discover a way of thought and life, a world away from their banal contemporaries, but their search for the transcendent leads them down a dangerous path beyond a human construct of morality. I mean, we open up knowing that Bunny is dead, and then we jump back in time and we follow our main character Richard, who is new to this college. In the beginning he's just kind of getting to know these people, and classics is very relevant, and I loved like all the mentions of classics. Obviously there's quite a lot. There were loads of mentions actually of the classics and like ancient Greek myth characters in the sealed letter, and every time it came up I got so excited because I knew what they were talking about. But if you don't know, it's not super integral, I don't think, to the story. I think you can get by without it. There's just like 1 or 2 little chunks where they talk like in depth about it. It's definitely interesting. Like, it's about their relationships with one another and their outlooks on life, and just like privilege versus people that don't have privilege, and academics and how important they are, and the way we look at history and the way we apply it to our lives, I think is important. And sin and like virtue and those kinds of ideas as well. There's a lot on that, which are all really interesting themes. I think it grapples with them very well. I think like this one gave credit to the reader. It wasn't too on the nose, and I really enjoyed that. It was very self-assured. The writing was strong, the characters were strong, the general premise and the themes were strong. I really enjoyed it. I found it really addicting. The pacing was a little wobbly, particularly in the second half for me. Just there were a few times I was like, okay, where are we going here? It is long, and it's a slow burn, this one. And the only other thing I can think of is like, by the time I got to the end, I don't think it could have ended any other way. But I don't know what to make of it all. Like, it's not the most like uplifting of books. Yeah, I just don't know what to make of it on the whole still, and it's been a couple of days reading it. I think objectively, like, I can understand why people think it's a masterpiece. I think it deserves a 9 out of 10. I'm gonna give it like an 8 and 8.5 for now, just because I don't know if I loved it enough. But I mean, who knows, but even by the time I'm editing I might change my mind. Yeah, 8.5 to The Secret History. And then the last book that I read this month, I audiobooks this one as well, and that is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read her 4 historical fiction novels from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo onwards. This is a romance, but it's like quite a heavy-hitting romance. We open with our main character, whose name has completely disappeared from my head, and she's out to dinner with her family. Everything's good. Her fiance Sam is there, and then she gets a call from her husband, who was presumed to be dead, and he's not dead. He crashed in a helicopter accident, and then jump back in time to watch her like grow up, and how she met both of these guys, and how her life kind of played out up until that moment of the phone call, and then obviously watch how are they all gonna figure this out. Like I think it's like a 40-60 split. 40% is like the backstory, and then 60% is how we're gonna figure this out. And the pacing again of this one was a little bit odd. Like it kind of stuck in periods of time. So we have that 40% backstory, and then there's a bit where she goes to Maine, and that bit takes up quite a big chunk of the book, and it just, I don't know. I just don't know if I loved the pacing, but I don't have any hard and fast criticisms either. Also, I predicted what early on how it was going to play out. It's hard because the clues of like why the reasons she makes are the reasons she makes are really well laid, but so well laid that I picked up, like, I think earlier than I was supposed to, what was going to happen. And I don't know if it is just one of those situations where it's just going to be a bit predictable. So I don't know. I wanted to be surprised. I wanted things to come up in a way that I wasn't expecting, and they didn't necessarily. I think it's very nuanced. I think it's really hard emotions that we're grappling with here, and it was all very believable. It did feel a bit slow paced at times, but I can kind of understand why. Yeah, I don't know. And it was also, the writing was a bit on the nose at times. I don't think it was as strong as her writing in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo onwards. Yeah, I thought I was going to really love it in the beginning, but then, like I said, just because the pacing and the predictability, I don't think it's left a very strong impression on me overall. But I enjoyed it while I was reading it. It's narrated by Julia Whalen. Because there are other books, there are often multiple narrators. She's at least played a hand in all of the audiobooks. And that, apart from Malibu Rising, which I think was just narrated by her. When I hear Julie Whalen now, like I've tried listening to a couple other books that she's narrated, and I couldn't because it just made me think of Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it has like a very serene tone to those books. They all feel like there's almost like a level of suave and formality to them. But now that I've listened to more of like a romance book by her, like her narration in a different style, I think I might be able to read some other books by her now, like her narration, which is great because she's a fantastic narrator, and she was great here as well. Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it though. I think I would give it somewhere between a 6 and a 7, probably. And those were all the books that I read in February. I'd love to hear what you read in February. If you've read any of these and you have any thoughts, please let me know them. Oh, I also watched Women Talking, the adaptation for Women Talking. I wanted to mention that quickly because, like I said, I read the book in January and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the adaptation. I didn't enjoy it as much as the book because they did take some liberties, they did change some things, and I definitely understood why. I definitely think its translation to film was made a lot smoother by that. I kind of wish they made the end more similar, if they made it a little bit longer, had that excitement that there was in the end, and I think it could have been so exciting to watch. But I mean, I can get over it for the most part. I think it's a really solid adaptation. I really enjoyed it. It's literally just I enjoyed the book a little bit more because the book obviously has more to it. It's longer. There's more depth in, you know, you can pack more depth in books than you can in scripts typically. Yeah, that is all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a super morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!